to sign more and more free trade agreements with other countries in the world. We hope we can have our network on that. So last point regarding China and India economic relationship, I like to say that India is good at service sectors. Chinese side is good at manufacturing sectors. So that's a quite complementary relationship. So we have to consider comprehensive relationship instead of just trading goods. Meanwhile, in my mind, actually, in China now, our manufacturing sector's contribution too high, still higher than 40%. So that's why we are encourage China's enterprises to go to other countries to promote manufacturing sector's development. On the other hand, in India, we found that actually a lot of people, they want to have a job. Actually, manufacturing sectors need to be promoted further. So in this regard, I'm quite optimistic that in the future between China and India, by regional economic cooperation, maybe in the future regional economic integration, we can promote better and comprehensive economic relationship. Just one case, just before our friend from Vietnam mentioned, trade relationship between Vietnam and India and China. Every year nowadays, the trade volume between China and Vietnam about 100 billion US dollars, but between China and India, only about 80 billion US dollars. Please do not forget that India has a 1.3 billion population and Vietnam only 100 million. So I think that in the future, the market potential is very huge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhang, for your, in particular, having let us share the knowledge about Chinese e-business situation. This is the whole presentation over. I apologize to you for having been so unable to handle the time allocation issue. We have only 15 minutes for a discussion. I'm taking maybe 3 or 4 questions. Like in session 1, I would like you to identify yourself and identify who you are going to ask questions. Please, the gentleman over there, please.
I am S.N. Chattopadhyay from India. In RIS appreciation terms, I must say this is a satisfactory session, which is the highest incidentally. I have a basic proposition. It's not a question really, it's a proposition. You see, the essence of all activities, business and otherwise, is give and take, humane considerations, empathy, and reciprocity. These are the basic ethical issues which I'm afraid are not specifically highlighted. But I'm absolutely certain, based on my 65 years of experience in government, in public sector, in private sector, I can vouch that these essentials need to be very vigorously pursued. My first proposition is all should get together regionally, globally, sectorally, country-wise, to suggest that let there be a global institute of ethical studies everywhere. And these ethical studies will primarily, with special emphasis to honesty, empathy, and reciprocity. The reason is, we know all over the world, by and large, the expenditure, the government expenditure on education is minimal. This is a very known fact. Whereas, for the development, the education on the financial allocation on education should be as high as possible, not less than 6 to 7%. Once you do that, as I said, globally, multilaterally, sectorally, and country-wise, you will never achieve globalization. How much you may talk. You may talk till the cows come home. As an effort, it will continue. Even 100 years later, you will say the same thing. So this emphasis is absolutely important, and I would request these bodies, Asia Pacific Forum, RIS, to highlight this, take up this matter as a mission. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your proposal. The next over there. Yes, please.
Good evening.
Okay, sure.
My name is Sanjay. The last panelist, I believe, had said that India is it's important. India is important in the service sector, and China is important in the manufacturing sector. So, is that a global perspective, or what we understand is India, its service sector, it's in US and China, but India is growing as a manufacturing sector. So, what exactly do we draw from this? What's the conclusion?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay. This is perhaps for Professor Urata. I like that you take up the issue of digitalization of services. And I think one aspect of technology that we often forget is that the technology is now easy, much easier than 20 years ago. So everybody can use the technology and use it for the services, basically. There are services that they can sell, not only domestically, but also cross-border. That's why the cross-border e-commerce is it's increasing very fast. But the thing is, while the business sector, private sectors, also a community in general use the technology easily, the governments, the one that use the policy and regulations, are quite reluctant to use this technology. Although they're the ones who get the burdens of this new technology and new kind of type of services, including cross-border services. Like, for example, 2 months ago, I listened to presentations of the head of custom office in Suvarnabhumi Airport, and he mentions that the number of package towards Suvarnabhumi Airport increased by 4 times, 3 to 4 times during the last 2 years. But they don't know how to do with this cross-border e-commerce. So although in my opinions, it's the technology that they can use to help their work. So how to encourage the government and also the policymaker to also use this kind of technology and also to deal with the cross-border services. And I think it's quite important since what Ms. Prakash, Anita Prakash, and Mr. Prabir, they talk about the data and the quantitative aspects of services. I think we can also use this technology to monitor the flow of services in the regions in much better way than previously with that.
Thank you very much. Well, maybe in the terms of time constraint, just one more question, and then I'm going to ask, please, yes.
Namaskar, I am Divyendra Mukhopadhyay. I want to ask one question, that how we are talking about the service sector. Management service is one of the emerging services in industry, management services. How we should provide marketing services, how we should, management consulting is also one of the new area. How Asia Pacific Forum will address this type of service, and how we should integrate so that we can create a new synergy and we can create the new tomorrow.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask our distinguished panelists to respond to the proposal and the questions. First, maybe Dr. Day, you have a reaction to the proposal, I thought.
Okay, quickly, in fact, if I come back to the last question, and he raised a very important question, and that's what my presentation last slide, talking about that we need to integrate the services, which you talked about, the financial services. Now, so this is a proposal that and integrating the services cross-border is very difficult, because we trade through 4 modes, and 4 modes, again, lots of complexities, not so can be done overnight. So we suggest that let's have a discussion, dialogue. So that's a good way to link up and integrate the services. But when you bring to the e-commerce, technology, then which will be, a new type of services, the traditional service like management consultancy or management services, is something different than the new technology which Rosal Damori he talked about. So I think this is an area, I mean, in the context of ASEAN, India services trade, these are not at all discussed, neither at all addressed, but these are new things we should look at, and we should do more discussion and dialogue. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps Professor Jian Jianping, you have an answer to the question about China, India?
Yes, that's a good question. Actually, you know that in economics, we often mention a saying that is comparative advantages. So I think that, today, why do we need to emphasize on both globalization and regional economic integration? Just because all of those two actually already becomes a major trend in the world. We cannot return to the history. So today, given that global value chain already make all of us living in a small, village, so that means we have to work together, and then every country can benefit from that process by your comparative advantages. So given that India has a very obvious, advantages for trading services, especially your IT sectors, your, software outsources, so famous in the world, as well as your medicine sectors, so famous in the world. So I think that you can play your, role, in the region and in global market. Of course, we have to consider, more balanced, relationship. But I like to say that, for example, just before that young guys mentioned, the future scenario. I think that if you consider, RCEP, if 16 economies can make an integrated market, so that means more and more, FDI inflow can concentrate it in India because you have your demographic dividend on the country. Chinese side already lost that dividend, demographic dividend every year in China. Our labor force, the total labor force reduced more than 3 million. That's a very amazing number. But in India, your young population and your advantages is very obvious, and you can attract more and more FDI inflow. And then you can promote your manufacturing sector's development. You can provide more and more job opportunities. And then, in Mumbai, I noticed that more than 1 million people protested, on the street just because they need to have a job. We need to avoid this type of phenomenon. And then, both your economic and social development will be promoted. So but of course, we have to pay attention is that lack of qualified infrastructure, that would be very difficult. So also in this regard, you have to have your road network, railway network, high-speed railway network, as well as a highway, ports, modern ports, international airports. So a lot of things need to be done. But I think that regional cooperation will promote this progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose Rizal. Very interesting question, good question. How can we make government use the digital economy? In my view, one or couple of, I think, possibilities. One is the private firms should put pressure